Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing.
Welcome to the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. I'm Joe.
And I'm Garrett.
And this episode, we will be covering episode 8 of the Watchmen TV series, titled A God Walks into Abar. Clever little play on words for the title this week, which I really enjoyed.
Yes.
As is the case with pretty much this entire season, of course, there's a lot to take in this episode, but this really kicked it into overdrive, I think. As you mentioned, Garrett, off air, you described this as being like kind of peak Lindelof, essentially. It definitely felt like something that he would be contributing to, essentially. So what were your first thoughts on this episode? It's a pretty wild ride.
Well, I was definitely looking forward to this episode. I would say of all the episodes that do the next on week, you know, like the show you what's coming the week ahead.
Right.
This was probably the one I anticipated the most, just to see how Dr. Manhattan would be portrayed. I thought the episode was very fun. I thought it was very exciting. It's not without some criticism. I think mainly just Dr. Manhattan, some timeline stuff. You know, again, some of the Lindelof things that he would do in Lost and probably The Leftovers. Never saw Leftovers. Just I assume he's doing it in The Leftovers. I have seen Lost. Obviously, the stuff that he did there. I'll tell you, I think it was one of the better episodes in the last couple weeks. So I think the show started off very strong. You know, episode 1, 2, 3, awesome. Can't really complain about them. I thought that it kind of got bogged down a little bit in the flashback of the Hooded Justice episode with the Angela episode. I thought even with Angela, you know, coming out of the Hooded Justice but doing Angela's backstory, I get the importance of them. I'm not denying that the characters are extremely important, and obviously both of them being significantly important to the racial discussion to have that this show is obviously taking head on. I felt like those two particular episodes, in comparison to the original, like the first 3 or 4 episodes, weren't as strong. And like I said, not as strong as in the racial component strong, but strong as in like what I wanted out of the Watchmen show.
Sure.
Because we get away from the characters like Looking Glass. We get away from the characters like, you know, Red Scare and Pirate Jenny and even Judd. And, you know, obviously he was in the first episode. But that's what I wanted out of this Watchmen show when it started. Like, I thought we were going to get that type of camaraderie with the group of people following these guys as they fight crime in a way. Not necessarily this racial dichotomy of the show going forward. So my expectations of the show from start to finish were flipped on their head. Mm-hmm. This episode, though, brought me kind of back to what I thought about the first couple episodes. I'm bringing in Dr. Manhattan. We're getting some more Ozymandias. We're getting some of that backstory of things that, you know, the events that happened with the squid.
Yes.
And so I would say, obviously, I'm taking this short answer, probably making it very long for you. So apologies.
No, hey,
but I thought it was one of the better episodes.
Very cool.
I thought that their handling of Dr. Manhattan was very interesting. I really enjoyed this portrayal of Dr. Manhattan versus the movie. On the characteristics, on the look of him, I have to say I 100% think that Dr. Manhattan from the movie was a way better look than when Cal is essentially blue.
Okay.
And we can go into that in a little bit, just kind of nitpicking Dr. Manhattan physically. And then we can talk about him as a character. But I'm sorry to have dialogued that for quite a while, so I will shut up.
No,
what did you think?
That is totally fine. I completely agree with you in the sense that I think it was a very strong episode. What I really enjoyed most about this, and from the outset, kind of what I wanted from this show also started to change. So from, I think, our very possibly first episode before this even released, when we were doing our introduction of this podcast series, I'd mentioned that I was very, very interested in learning more about what has happened to Ozymandias and Dr. Manhattan since we last saw them from the movie, or if you read the comic book, from the comic book, kind of how they've arrived at the current day, essentially.
Yes.
As the show progressed, I think we were introduced to so many new, strong characters that I started to deviate a little bit from that. I'm like, actually, I'm kind of good without them to a certain extent, and I really like seeing these core characters. Unfortunately, also as you mentioned, we didn't get much of that camaraderie, which I was kind of looking forward to. I was hoping that we'd see more between Pirate Jenny, Looking Glass, Red Scare, and Sister Night. I wanted them to go out as a group and fight crime, and we just haven't really gotten that. So, to finally arrive at an episode where they got to deep dive on Dr. Manhattan and give you a little bit more insight into his character, it was outstanding. I really enjoyed it. I also think that to see his portrayal about how he is simultaneously experiencing everything essentially throughout time and how differently time works for him was a really unique take. And I think they did that very successfully as well. Jumping ahead a little bit here, but I think my favorite moment was when he's talking about how he fell in love with her. I know it's toward the end of this episode, so I won't discuss it too much. Or I'll try not to discuss it too much right now. But once again, how he experiences time so much differently and simultaneously, essentially. And it's that line that's when he's falling in love with her, but then flashback sequences how he knows he's going to be in love with her. It's very mind-boggling for how they do this, but it was really, really cool.
Okay. So, no, I think that's his That's my nitpick. It's going to be how he's experiencing time simultaneously in multiple different time periods with multiple people at the same time, which I really want to talk about with the conversation that he is simultaneously having with Angela and Will Reeves that might kick off this entire show.
Exactly.
But
it's pretty interesting.
Let's pin that for right now. So come back to that because I also want to talk about him experiencing these different timelines all at the same time. What I feel like they didn't answer, or at least raises a question for me, is does that take place as soon as he transforms into Dr. Manhattan? So as soon as he comes out of whatever the particle accelerator thingy-majigger is that he steps into and turns into Dr. Manhattan, does he immediately then start to experience time that way? So while before he's even in Vietnam fighting, he's obviously with Laurie Blake. Does he, while he's with Laurie Blake, simultaneously know that he's going to be with Angela Abar later? And does he know that these are the events that are going to take place? That's what I feel like we didn't get an answer to, or maybe I'm the only one asking that question, but because we know that the comic book existed and we know those events existed, at what point does he start to experience simultaneous time? And I think that is something that I want answered because I think it plays into his character. Is he with Laurie Blake and Angela Abar at the same time? Right?
Yeah, and so, I think he is, essentially. Obviously, where we're at now, writing a completely new storyline to kind of pair up with the original Watchmen series, we have to take some creative liberties to get there, I think. But that was how I read that. That the only time... Now, maybe, from the initial outset of the incident, he had to learn how to use... Just like any superhero origin, right? We can assume he probably had a moment of time, relative to him, where he had to figure out his new existence, essentially, right? But yeah, I definitely read that as he's experiencing all of this. It gets really messy, though, once you start to do that, because if not only is he essentially time traveling on a whim, but it's multiple versions of him. So it's not even just like a standard time travel trope. There are multiple versions of him at all times. It's very bizarre.
Well, and I guess let's just tackle it right now. Well, not tackle it right now, I guess. Let's hold that to the end of the episode when it takes place. But you leave for multiple butterfly effects. If Angela proved that she can trip up Dr. Manhattan just like that on the conversation with Will Reeves, because it seems like he's who's Judd Crawford, right? Mm-hmm. And it seems to have caught Dr. Manhattan to the idea that he doesn't understand what he just did. Linking these two groups together, two people in different time periods. And maybe he's never done that prior to this particular instance.
Right.
But I don't know.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely, it throws some issues once you start deep diving that, because if he's so concerned about, if he's not concerned about the butterfly effect, depending on how you look at this, why is he willing to share so much with Angela in that first scene? But for whatever reason, he's drawing the line at the tragedy that occurs. I mean, he's basically told her everything that's going to happen, which time travel kind of 101 is you don't interfere with events, at least to the best of your abilities. You kind of let events unfold naturally. But here he is, as far as I'm concerned, directly influencing the outset of all of those by walking up to Angela and having that conversation.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do you subscribe to time travel from Avengers Endgame or from Back to the Future?
Yeah, so Endgame was interesting because they kind of have those different, what do you want to call them, pockets, I guess?
Yeah, these different, basically offshoots of time.
Yeah, the offshoots of time. So prior to Endgame, I was definitely more like Back to the Future, man.
Yes.
Where you can't alter things because it will have catastrophic events that unfold as a result of it. And I would still say, if you're forcing me to choose between the two, I will stand by Back to the Future.
I agree. I think that Back to the Future ultimately is correct in that, clearly tangent right now, offshoots that if you go back and, he ends up, if you've seen the movie, right? So he goes back and let's say he ends up getting with his mother in the movie, his entire existence is not necessarily erased because he still exists in that time period. It does create a new offshoot, but the events, though, going forward, though, could catastrophically change everything else. Like his sister, I don't think he would be erased. His sister could be erased, though. Does that make sense? If he ends up with his mother, because I think his existence exists in that current time. So he's not gone. His sisters and brother could be erased, though, from the movie.
Yeah.
Which they clearly are from the photo, which I think that they messed up by trying to erase, Michael J. Fox as well. But that's my, I don't have a science degree for time travel. I don't have a time travel degree. Can't explain that. I just think that's what's tough too, because we're also 2 episodes, like this is episode 8.
This was 8. We have one more.
And we introduced all this time travel, or not time travel, but basically time indifference.
That's a good way to describe it.
With 1 episode left. And maybe that's why it doesn't matter, because there is only 1 episode left and the show ends. And we don't know if we're getting a second season, at least as far as I know we're not. I know that The Ringer had an interview with Damon Lindelof today. So I don't know if he mentioned that we're having season 2 or not. I haven't listened to that podcast yet. I was trying to hold off on that. But, let's kind of break this down. So let's just take Dr. Manhattan. He is walking, he's walking into the bar. Mm-hmm. To meet, essentially, he's there to meet Angela, correct? Do we agree with that? Like, he's there on a mission.
Oh, absolutely. That was not accidental.
Or do you think he walks in and just sees her and immediately knows that that's who he loves?
So are you saying that that very first initial interaction could quite possibly truly be just serendipitous?
Correct. That's what I'm asking.
Interesting. I did not. I assumed that this is a moment in time, once again, time being very strange for Dr. Manhattan, that it was no accident that he walks into that bar to find Angela.
I agree. There is a moment in the show, I don't have the quote, where I think he says as soon as he saw her, though, it's where he just could read everything about her.
Okay.
And then he kind of fell in love with her.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't buy that, because in this situation, as soon as he arguably becomes Dr. Manhattan, he's experiencing time all at the same time simultaneously, which means he would have already known everything about her, right?
It's a great little plot device, too, which I know we'll get to it, but some of this really couldn't exist, I don't think, if they didn't have the whole memory wipe kind of deal going on, which we'll get to that.
Which I don't buy that, but whatever.
That part, agreed. We'll get there.
Yeah
we'll get
there. They have this conversation, and he's hitting on her, essentially.
Yeah.
He wears a blue mask over his blue body, which is funny because he does blend in with everybody else, right?
Yeah. It's the celebration of Dr. Manhattan, essentially. So
I thought I liked the camera angles. I liked how he always shot from the back of his head. I enjoyed the way we focus in on his hands as he's making different shapes and he's kind of moving around and talking about things. I won't lie, I thought he was going to fill her beer glass up.
Okay, yeah.
Because it was empty, so I thought that's how he was going to prove that he had power, was by refilling her beer glass, not by producing an egg and then consuming the egg. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of funny because I think this entire interaction, like we said, is it chicken or egg, right? We talk later about chicken or egg. The conversation with me is, or the interaction is, does he go there to meet her, or does he go there and ends up seeing her and knows everything about her, so he meets her? So the whole entire relationship is chicken or egg as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the conversation we have with this entire show now, after we've seen this episode, is it chicken or egg, and what caused the events to spark this chain reaction? So what were your thoughts on their interaction as far as their dialogue, him hitting on her, her reactions to him?
I thought probably this portion of the episode, so the flashbacks to Vietnam, overall probably my favorite moments.
Okay.
I really loved the dialogue between the two because up until this point, which I will point out, I've stressed time and again how detached Dr. Manhattan is a lot of the time. And maybe I'm doing him a disservice by having described him that way because it's very clear from this episode he does want to be more human, it seems like. I don't think he'd be doing what he has been doing if that were not truly the case for him. So maybe I'm wrong there. You know, it's very clearly he is trying to make that connection, which is clearly not him being detached.
Right.
So I just find it very interesting. Goes back to my point I mentioned from the outset of this episode here too, that he's hitting on her by telling her the truth about all these future events
that they're already together,
that are happening, that they're already together.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very bizarre, but I think a very well written exchange between those.
Do you buy that would have worked? Like, the reason why I asked that is she makes the comment that she hates Dr. Manhattan.
Right.
And that she hates Dr. Manhattan because essentially his arrival to Vietnam in this war led to basically the actions, chicken or egg, right,
yeah.
of the puppeteer murder, blowing her family up. Mm-hmm. So my question is, do you really believe that her, of all people, because she's a very no-nonsense lady throughout this entire series. Like, there's nothing about her characteristics that would tell me that she's a very forgiving person.
Right.
Okay? Really, the only person I feel like she's forgiving of would maybe be Judd Crawford. And that's probably because of that, simply they have that connection from the White Knight. That's essentially it. But I feel like she would not be so quick to basically forgive that he is Dr. Manhattan.
Okay, and I think I do buy this by the end of the episode. So I think they did a really good job, once again, by him having this prolonged conversation with her in that bar, that by the end of the episode where she says, F it, like, yeah, let's go out on that date tomorrow, whatever the case may be. I buy it at that point that her character, I think that's staying true to her character is my point. That after that prolonged conversation with how intriguing he made the conversation, that despite how no-nonsense, matter-of-fact she is, her interest would probably be piqued a little bit by the end of their conversation there. So
let's talk about choosing a body.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so they have a conversation, and they go to the morgue, and he needs to blend in. And she grabs 3 bodies, 3 white guys, that all have been killed that have no alias, or essentially no next of kin.
Right.
Okay? Heart attacks, stuff like that. He asks her which one she would be comfortable in, and she doesn't really respond to any of the Caucasian or white bodies. Pulls out what we know is Calvin Abar died of a heart attack, no next of kin either. And next thing we know, he basically absorbs into Cal, what we know of Cal, right? Calvin. What did you think about this?
Yeah, the thing I guess I need to go back to maybe rewatch is, excuse me, why she didn't use that body as an option. Did you catch why that was? Were they previously in a relationship then? Like
no,
because I don't understand.
Like, why she didn't use the white bodies, or why she used Calvin's?
No, like, at first when she pulls the first 3 bodies out in the morgue, she makes it seem like those are the only 3, essentially. And it's after he prompts her that she's like, okay, yeah. And then she, like, goes to open where Cal's body is. So I didn't know how to read that. It seemed like, did she have, maybe if they weren't in a relationship, did she like him? Or something?
I guess that's a good point. I have to go back and rewatch that scene as well. And I know exactly what you're saying, because there's a pause where she doesn't pull him out till after she questions him again.
Yeah.
I thought it was simply that she wasn't going to find any of them comfortable. Maybe she didn't believe what he was going to be able to do. Like, at that point too, it's hard to say, like, how does she know to what extent his powers are, or to blend in? Because we don't really see that. We basically see them go from the dinner to the morgue to pick out a body.
Yeah.
Which we know we know the time has shifted, because it's not like it's the next day.
No.
Right? They've gone to dinner. They clearly are in a relationship by this point.
Right. I think they say a few weeks maybe have
I believe
transpired
so.
since the bar where they met. Almost.
Well, I know that everything's up to, I believe, and I might be correct, 6 months is when they get into their fight, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is just, I can't wait to get to that, because that'd be funny. Obviously, she would be comfortable. It's interesting, because this is a show about racial relations. There's not a lot of interracial relations in this show, though. The only really interracial relations that we see, and I could be incorrect, are the fact that Cal and Angela have white kids from a previous group person's marriage that they're just raising. Other than that, there's not a lot of interracial coupling. Am I wrong? Am I missing anything that you can think of?
Nothing that, comes to mind from what we see in the current. Well, obviously we have Captain Metropolis and Hooded Justice that were together during the flashback sequences. But if you're talking about like the current day, there isn't a couple that springs to
Do you
mind
think
for
that's
that,
a weak part of the show? Because I know that the show's about racial, strife and stuff like that. But let's obviously racism is still very much alive today. But let's not act like interracial couples don't exist, right? Do you think that that's a weak part that we're not showing interracial coupling in this show about racial tension?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think it's a weak point.
Okay.
No, it's just
Well,
how they I think have kind of get the fact that we only have one episode left, but the characters as we know them thus far, I don't think the show has been dealt a disservice by not portraying that.
Okay.
So yeah.
So he selects Cal. He what happens next? He ends up going to.
It's tough to keep track of in this episode.
It is tough. It is tough.
They're jumping around all over the place.
Does he go to? Do they have the fight next, or does he go to see Adrian?
I honestly couldn't.
Yeah, I would have to rewatch it too. You know what? Let's do this.
But then that begs the question: though, does it really matter? Because this is all kind of at the bar to begin
same
with.
time.
Like it's him jumping through.
That's true.
All these different things.
Okay, so let's go to the 6 months then. So
Yeah.
he does tell her at the bar that in 6 months there's going to be a big fight. She's going to ask him to leave. It would be really annoying to fight with somebody who's already experienced the fight and knows exactly what you're going to say at all times.
Yeah, super frustrating.
And it's just, I really love the part where he looks at her and says, "Do you need me to do you need to say it or like, whatever?" And she's like, "Leave." Or no, she says,
she asks him,
"Do you need me to say it?" And he's like, "Yes, I do." And he just gets up and leaves. I think that is the point though, because I think he does go to from there. He goes to Adrian Veidt.
I believe so, but then see, it's that exact scene. So this begs the question. It is kind of the butterfly effect. Like if he had not been so antagonistic in that scene,
Do they fight?
So he's
like,
influencing the outcome.
Because he keeps
of
saying,
the fight.
we're going to fight.
Yeah.
This is where we fight
He
now.
keeps pushing
we're,
buttons.
We're about to fight again.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, no, we're not. And he's like, oh, it's coming.
We're going to.
Yeah.
If he just had been like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right.
Which is funny because I really don't buy that she would be in a relationship with somebody like that. Like, maybe he's all powerful and there's clearly something to be said for being in a relationship with a god. But Angela does not strike me as somebody that would deal with something like that well. And she clearly doesn't. But she's trying to be level-headed, and all due respect to her character. She's like, "We're not going to fight. Why do you keep saying this? I'm not raising my voice. We're just talking." And but because she keeps getting needled by him about, "Oh, fight's coming, she overreacts. And you know what? I don't blame her. Like, I don't think it would be easy, and I think that Laurie Blake. I wish we get more Laurie Blake interaction with this because it's almost like we're completely, glossing over the fact that she was in a relationship with Dr. Manhattan. I wish that we would be able to get in. I want an interaction between Angela and Laurie Blake about what their relationships were like with Dr. Manhattan. I would love for a scene where both ladies are at the bar drinking, talking about how difficult it is to be in a relationship with Dr. Manhattan.
Right.
Because I feel like there's an entire episode built on these women being frustrated with him.
Yeah, quite possibly. I think that'd be a really cool interaction to see is both of them sitting down to commiserate, I guess you could say, about that. But I get the impression from this, and I could be totally wrong, but maybe he hasn't made it seem like such a problem until right then, because she brings up the fact that I don't think she uses these words, but that it's a gift to always know what's coming because you'll never be surprised by it. So
Right.
maybe she has liked this foresight up to this point that he has, possibly, and now this is purely me hypothesizing, but maybe the first time where now suddenly his ability to have seen the future is like directly having a consequence with her involved.
That's fair. No, she does say he does say he hasn't been scared since he got turned into Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, that's right.
He does say to her that you've been happy with the security and safety I provide you. Like, that's true. But what's funny is her character doesn't seem to need security and safety.
Yeah,
but I get it because her family's basically been killed due to acts that are unforeseen. Whereas this is a man who can foresee those same acts.
Yeah.
But what's funny is there are things where chicken or egg. And I know we talk about time travel. Why can't he simultaneously go back and stop that?
Yeah. See.
I
think the weakest part about this episode. And listeners, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where they're not following a clear rule set.
Yes.
So he's not willing to share the tragedy that will occur in the future. He's
Right.
drawing a line, but those lines aren't very strict. Because if he does go back, I mean, maybe there is that, maybe that is one isolated incident where the butterfly effect would be too great, that if he saves her parents, the dominoes fall in such a way that...
There's two. Well, that's not the weakest part. The weakest two parts of this episode are A, the fact that he still gets hit by the ray gun at the end, and B, the fact that he's got eyes that we discussed off camera. The way he looks at the house at the end is ridiculous.
Having the eyes and not like the all like glowing eyes, yes, it was very jarring. But the worst, you're right. That part was, while maybe kind of jarring, I was like, okay, whatever. But the ray gun at the end.
Yes,
like,
it's so dumb. It's so dumb, and I
really
can't think of
frustrating.
I can't think of any reason why that happened.
Like,
So
it just screams. This needed to happen for the plot, and no other reason.
Yeah, it's a Doctor Strange thing. Like the only outcome is this way type of deal. That's the way I looked at it. Is that, there's 1,000,004 outcomes, whatever it is. That's the only one.
That's true.
But let's come back to that.
Okay.
So he goes and sees Adrian, and so I think that this timeline of the television show episode does exist this way because I think he goes naked. So I think he goes from her apartment where he is naked.
Oh, you're right.
And he starts
exactly
walking. And he starts walking across the winter tundra in all his glory. And he goes into the location, I don't remember, the lair essentially of Ozymandias from the comic, from the movie. You see the statue of the saber-toothed tiger, and you get like all of like that kind of throwback, which was really kind of cool.
It was a cool scene.
Yeah, it was neat. It was like the equivalent of like going to Tatooine for Mandalorian this week, right?
Exactly.
It's a little bit of fan service.
Right.
And he sneaks up on Adrian, and Adrian's watching television, and he's mad. He's angry. He looks disheveled. He clearly has been living there by himself for a while in exile.
Right.
And I just love it when he turns around and goes, "Hello, John." And it's like, it is odd because in a show where we haven't seen any other superpowers outside of Dr. Manhattan, whereas the comic book would lead you to believe that maybe Ozymandias has some superpower. We don't see that he has superpower, but yet he still seems to be on some level a intellectual equal to Dr. Manhattan. Why? Explain to me how that can even happen.
Yeah, because reasons, Garret.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because logic. But like you said, I think it's because he is so detached. There are just things that are almost maybe so simple that he can't compute it. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like he would short circuit if something so simple existed, but then they have this conversation and he talks about love, which is what Adrian discovers, and how he wants to be more human. And I do really like their witty banter, especially when he apologized for trying to kill him 30 years ago.
Yeah, these scenes were great too. Between
simultaneously taking place, right?
Yes.
So you can make the argument that he's trying to kill him at the same time they're having this conversation. I don't know. It
creates problems.
It does create problems.
Yeah. It's super cool on its surface, and like it really drew me in. But then the more you sit down, putting pen to paper to kind of map out, okay, well, this happens at the same time as this happens. Well, it's actually all happening at the same time. It's just hard to rationalize how things unfold the way they do because of that. I don't know.
Right.
Very
Agreed.
bizarre.
Anyways, they concoct a plan.
Yes.
To basically put this inhibitor, I think is what you called it last week,
Yeah.
a blocker that can prevent him, or will basically lapse his memory and prevent him from being Dr. Manhattan as we know it. He'll just live as Cal. I do think there's a little thing that they offset in there, which I wish they just wouldn't have done it. It's the winter night, or the white night, where they talk about how he gets pushed out of the way. And I always question, where did he go on that night, right?
Yeah,
I always question, I'm like, how come this guy's not in the house, or he doesn't seem to be in the scene defending his wife? Turns out he's able to circumvent this when it comes to life or death situations, blows the guy up, and that's why she doesn't remember that. Or at least said she doesn't remember number 2, right? She never said I think she said she doesn't remember the second gunman, but that's because she's covering for him.
Yeah.
But I hated how they kind of did that throwaway line because they didn't need to go back and say that. They didn't need to say that he killed that guy. No. Like, I was fine with that. I thought that was a little too much because, A, we didn't see it happen, so we didn't need the explanation of a life or death situation. He can overcome this inhibitor. I just think that was kind of a thing that they threw in there for the plot, and I didn't think that was needed. Do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. And the only reason I could think that they made a point of showing this is if, for some reason, probably during a flashback of some kind, this next episode, it becomes even more relevant because now we've set a precedent for no reason by giving us that information.
Got it.
So sure, if nothing further comes from it, then whatever. It just would be an unnecessary plot point. But now that they've set the precedent by saying that this was something he was able to do when he had the inhibitor in his head, that was a pure life or death situation kind of thing, I don't know. Maybe we'll learn something else about it in the next episode as something maybe he did while he was still Cal that we haven't seen yet. That's what I was trying to rationalize as I was watching that scene because I had the same thought as you. I'm like, why are we getting this?
Well, here's the thing though. I'm like, the more I think about it, the more we can come back to this later at the end of the episode, have to have a second season. There is so much to tie up in this next episode, unless we're just going to not answer questions. And I feel like this is an issue they had with Lost. They asked so many questions that didn't get answered. And that's fine. I don't think you have to answer every question. But there's just things that we went through, like as simple as Lube Man. I think everybody knows it's Petey, but it will be disappointing, I think, if we don't confirm that.
Right.
Just for fun. Just for the sake of, the funny part of, like, maybe Red Scare walks in on him, like, I don't know. And it makes it funny. Like, but that will be disappointing.
Yeah. Do you think we get some kind of Avengers moment in this last episode? Where we finally do get Pirate Jenny, Red Scare, Sister Knight, Lube Man, like, let's get them in there too. Looking Glass, like, they're all suited up and they're going after the 7th Cavalry.
That would be that would be awesome. Because here's the thing, I could see him doing a second season, maybe not Lindelof, but you know how all the show, like the comics and the movies, have those pictures that get taken of the entire groups.
Yeah,
this could be where they form the group.
Okay, yeah.
And so season 1 ends with them uniting for like the new Minutemen or whatever the group title will be, and maybe season 2 is they are now a full functioning, I don't want to say superhero group, but vigilante group. Okay, and we do get the photo of them all together because I think that would be I would be disappointed if we didn't get a photo with them all together.
That'd be kind of a poetic way to end it, right?
But that being said, we still have so much left to like. We just Looking Glass. We know he's alive. Obviously, I'm assuming he comes back in this next episode. Mm-hmm. Our theory is that he's under the hood of one of the 7th Cavalry because the hood's missing from the guy that's in his basement.
A great theory you have, yes. I'm convinced of that. After you talked about that last week, I'm like, yeah, it's got to be what's happening.
Right.
Here. Yeah.
The next thing is, though, he gets the inhibitor. He goes back to Angela. Mm-hmm. He basically proposes to her kind of in a way. They get down. He puts the inhibitor in. Next thing we know, she's hitting him with the hammer, and he's waking up. Now, here's where I thought the episode got even better. I loved the interaction with her and him after he came out of Cal. Because the best part of the episode is when he is standing on the pool, and she comes out and she goes, "We don't have time for this." And she is just like, you can tell she has zero patience for him right now and all of his, whatever he's doing. Okay? Now, I don't want to gloss over the building of Europa. I don't want to gloss over the young story. So let's kind of put that towards the end. Sure. We'll talk about Dr. Manhattan building off Jupiter. We'll talk about Ozymandias, at the end as well. Like we always put him at the end. So we'll do that as well. So I don't want to gloss over that stuff. I just want to say that let's get through the Dr. Manhattan laser cannon. What did you think about the interaction when he comes out?
I thought this moment was really great as well because to your point of saying that Angela is definitely someone who doesn't take shit from anyone, to put it plainly, and that she wouldn't have patience for that kind of behavior, essentially. So this scene was really, really great.
Yeah, it was the best.
She's right. He's just kind of trying to figure out ways to, and then he goes in to make waffles or something. That was great. That was probably the best part of that entire sequence there, is when he starts going in to make food.
I just like how she's like, I think I saw a meme where it's like Regina King has no time for gods on water. You know what I mean? Just like things like that.
Yeah.
And then the kids are watching him, stuff like that, and all of a sudden he zaps the kids out of there, and he's like, oh, they're safe, but we don't know where the kids went.
Right. And this also, I get that he's kind of confused and trying to remember and figure things out, but that also then I guess speaks to the detachment, because no one in their right mind would just zap someone's kids out of there and be like, oh yeah, it's cool,
right?
Like, so it's once again that detachment. He sees it as a very logical thing. He knows they need to be saved, like they need to be safe, but he just transports them out of there. So I really like this scene. They did a good job. I think to sum it up, what I liked most about that is that they found a good way to bring some humor to the tension through their interaction. So.
Yeah, they brought a lot of humor, and a lot of that is in the way he looks. There are a lot of talk on Twitter today with comparisons to a lot of different characters that are blue. The funniest one is, I don't know if you're a fan of Arrested Development, but it's when David Cross dresses him, like basically paints himself blue, and he's wearing his little cutoff shorts that he's never nude, and he's walking up to, I think it's to Jason Bateman, and he's like, I just blew myself, and it's like that guy looks more like Dr. Manhattan than this guy looks like Dr. Manhattan, because I saw a side by side of Cal's Dr. Manhattan, which of course he also gets Cal's likeness, which is odd. And then the actual likeness of Billy Crudup's Dr. Manhattan from the movie, and the movie is significantly better.
The fact that he retains Cal's features, that's totally cool. The fact that it's just kind of like a body paint, and that, I don't know, just add a subtle glow.
I don't know how the show couldn't. I don't know how the show didn't know to do this.
Yeah,
it's a very disappointing reveal of him. For a show that's generally been hitting the mark every time. It's kind of like a huge lapse. I don't know who was watching this episode or who was helping Lindelof do this and thought, you know what, let's make him look like Will Smith the genie. You know what I mean? And just paint him. And he looks bad. And the fact that he doesn't have just the white eyes, that he actually has Cal's eyes?
Yeah, I do wish that they'd done the white eyes, where it's the glowing eye. Or they don't even have to dial the glow up to 11. I'm not saying that, but like just have the white eyes on there.
Glow up. Or you know what they could have done though? They could have done a throwaway line later or earlier when they were in that hotel angry at each other, where he does glow and he does have white eyes, and she thinks it's creepy. And and that's fine. And then he gets Cal's, appearance or whatever it is, and he gets Cal's eyes or whatever it is. Like, there's just a way to have done this that I think would have made it so at the end he doesn't look like a Smurf.
Well, yeah, but even when he first is awakened by Angela, now I'm glad they don't do the neon glow thing the entire time, but that initial scene, I was cool with that. Like, he has Cal's likeness there, he has the glowing eyes, he looks pretty badass, and then he kind of just
goes for the matted finish.
Yeah, face paint, just kind of blue paint. It looked very kind of odd, okay. I guess. Yeah.
So at this time that he's making waffles and they're having the conversation, she's trying to push with urgency that the 7th Cavalry is coming to kidnap him, that they know who he is, coming to basically kill him. And he tells her they've been here the whole time. They're parked outside with this, I don't remember what the ray gun is called, but some kind of ray gun. And it's okay. Like, this is where the tragedy takes place.
Yeah.
And she, says F that. She goes to get guns that he clearly knows she was going to do. And she's going to go out there and to save his life. And she goes out there, and there's like 15 to 20 of them. Now, I didn't think she would be killed. But let's be honest with you. She wouldn't have survived that. And he shows up, and he just starts blowing people away.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question I have, too, for this. It's not that he needs to be worried about being shot. In the movie, you see Dr. Manhattan be in multiple places at one time, not just amongst timelines. There's a scene where he's obviously having sex with Laurie Blake's character.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's actually doing that while he's working on the machine in the other room at the same time, right? And there's actually multiple of him.
Yeah.
And so I thought it would have been cool if he would have appeared in multiple spots and just blew them all up at the same time, instead of doing the Matrix thing with the bullets, which I didn't really care for the Neo part. At the end of this, though, The fact that he still gets hit with the ray gun is extremely upsetting, not because it's sad. It's a horrible plot device here.
Yeah,
because we acknowledge that we think the outcome has changed because she goes out there to stop everybody, that he comes to her rescue, and that the guy that got shot holding the ray gun didn't die but still shoots him, but yet he's still standing right in front of the ray gun to get shot. Okay? And that he wouldn't just destroy the guy with the ray gun in the first place.
Yeah.
Or the ray gun itself. I guess there's no explanation for it. It's the problem with having Superman. It'd be like if Superman knew that there was a kryptonite gun and he kills everybody but the kryptonite gun and then happens to get shot by it. And it's just like, well, that's just so convenient, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It was very frustrating. And I hope there's a payoff at this last episode that justifies these types of, I'll call them plot holes, I guess, for lack of a better term. Not even, because they're not necessarily holes, they're just unsatisfactory plot points is more what they are. But just as you mentioned with your Doctor Strange reference, if there is a similar payoff in this final episode where the reason Dr. Manhattan isn't being more assertive in these situations is because he's pushing everything toward an outcome of his choosing, or an outcome he knows needs to happen, I, in retrospect, will be able to kind of accept some of the currently unsatisfactory things in this episode. Does that make sense? Like,
no,
if
it does.
If it's all a bigger picture, since he does experience time simultaneously and so differently, if it's all for a bigger picture and a bigger cause, and he needs these events to unfold in the way they've unfolded, okay, I'll buy that. But that better be what's happening here.
Sorry, it's called a tachyon cannon.
Oh, the tachyon cannon.
For all the nerds at home.
I think tachyons, they kind of are his kryptonite, aren't they? Isn't tachyons what's something to do with the thing in his head?
It could be. I don't know that. That's over my head. But essentially, he gets shot into another dimension. Essentially, basically, he's at the mall. Right?
Yeah.
Do we assume he's at the mall?
We assume he's at the mall. We assume
Okay.
he's captured.
Okay.
In some
Which is
capacity
great
by
because
them.
actually we could get a really good interaction with him and Laurie Blake.
Oh, that's true.
Because Laurie Blake is at the mall.
That's going to have to happen, I think.
Yes,
now.
that will be really fascinating. That's what I kind of miss about this show, or I think it's hurting the show right now, in my opinion, because I think the show is great. But I'm missing those characters that I want. Like, Laurie Blake, in my opinion, is probably the best character in the show. I really believe that. Followed by Looking Glass. It's not that I don't think Regina King's a great character. She is, but she's kind of pigeonholed into the main character. But really, we didn't get her backstory till a season ago, or an episode ago. You know, and it's good, but it's like, I feel like there's way more nuance with Looking Glass because he's so different, and with Laurie Blake because she comes with the history of being the original member of this group and where it's at today and how much her character has changed. Don't get me wrong, I think Regina King has way more of a story than Red Scare, but I'm not going to lie, I want Red Scare's story. I want to know what he's up to.
Right.
You know? Let's talk about where Dr. Manhattan has been for, what was it, 30 years? Is that what they said?
20 years.
20 years?
I think it's 20 years, I want to say.
He says that he was basically on Europa, which is a moon of Jupiter, and that he was actually not on Mars. And that was just a recording of him on Mars. Okay? And he goes to Jupiter and he builds Eden. And by building Eden, he creates an Adam and Eve character.
Yes.
Which we find out from his childhood, as his father and him were escaping, I'm assuming, Nazi Germany, that he basically is hiding in a room as a couple is having intercourse, and that turns out to be the characters that we will know as Phillips and Crookshanks. Mm-hmm. And he uses their likeness because they were so kind to him and gave them a Bible and talked about Genesis, the book of Genesis, that they would be his Adam and Eve. What did you think about this?
Yeah, I thought this was really, really fascinating. I liked this portion of the show where he kind of tries to build his own Eden, and that there were people that were kind to him in his past that had a positive influence on him. Now, obviously, you know, can argue, I guess, the morality of his actions for what he's done throughout his entire life, essentially, or at least since having been Dr. Manhattan. But yeah, I like this kind of not even a callback, the flashback to see where Phillips and Crookshanks originated from and why it's them that are the clones, you know, why we're getting their likenesses. Because I know originally you'd thrown out, I think, the idea that maybe that was John Osterman, but Phillips was maybe the original version of John Osterman.
Right.
It's not, but it's tied intrinsically with his story, so it's very important.
Right,
that we
but
still
it is
get their character.
it is not him, but it is Adam. The game warden is Adam.
Yes,
actually,
he is the original. Yes.
But I like the idea when they were talking about how many days does it take to create. I think maybe it's in the bar, create your Eden. And she's like, "Did you rest on the seventh day?" He's like, no, this was really a matter of minutes, and seconds,
Yes,
and he
that's
creates everything. And I thought that was really great. I like the idea that the people he creates were worshiping him, and they didn't want him to leave, and he couldn't handle it, so he left. And when he obviously visits Adrian, he takes Adrian out of there, and he basically zaps him over to Europa to take his spot as a new essential god or leader of those people. And I think there are questions for that. There's a lot of questions, like the machine in the basement that takes these fetuses, essentially these clones, and grows them. Mm-hmm. Is this something that Dr. Manhattan gave him, or is this something that he was able to build himself? And then the question is, how is he still able to pull these clones out of the ground like that? There's just a lot of questions. Maybe I don't need those answered.
Sure,
but I have questions about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's not something that I necessarily need to have answered, but there's not a whole lot that makes sense about Veidt being able to perpetuate that process,
right,
as we know it.
Right.
Because with Dr. Manhattan, it's super easy. He can create life. So, okay, there's your explanation. But what setup was put in place that this could keep happening for Veidt? I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because Adam is the game warden. So my question is, where's Eve?
Yeah.
I wonder if we'll get that answer. Mm-hmm. And again, that's another question. It's just a question, and I'll kind of go through some plot holes I feel like that we don't have questions answered to that I'm hoping we get answered in the next hour episode. But an hour episode seems like that's not a lot of time to go through a lot of things.
Right.
But anyways, we know that he's on Europa. That's where he's been. He's on, he had trial. He is basically having tomatoes smashed in his face as he keeps repeatedly saying that he is not going to, that he's going to leave. He's not going to stay. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What was your take on the tomatoes thing?
I loved that scene. So prior to that, after knowing that he'd been found guilty, right? And I know these sequences with Veidt are very bizarre, but I still thought something terrible was going to happen to him. So that's what I'd been thinking leading up to this moment. We're finally getting to that moment, and then they're smashing tomatoes in his face. It was just very preposterous.
It's a very callback to the first episode where he's eating the tomatoes.
Yes, exactly. He squeezes the tomato on the tree. Yeah. But anyway, I thought it was great. I've talked time and time again about how the just weirdness of these moments with Veidt, I think, are very bizarre but work well with this show, and they shouldn't, but they do.
Right.
It's just very strange. I also wanted to, brief tangent, also something I need to go back to rewatch. There was mention of an elephant, I believe.
Okay.
In passing.
Do you know where?
I need to double check, so I apologize. I did not come
This is a good tangent.
prepared with this. Yeah, this is a really great tangent. It'll be a short-lived tangent. But it was a throwaway line in this particular episode, if memory serves me correctly. And I just wonder if it has some kind of connection back to the elephant that we saw in the previous episode with Angela. So.
Oh, he says yes. So it's. I'm trying to find it where I can here. Let me see here. Yes, it is. It's he says a little alien or a little elephant told him.
Little elephant told him. Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. There's no way that's a coincidental line.
No.
So are we going to get more answers to that? I actually really hope we do, because that is one of the more bizarre plot points that have come up in a show that's full of bizarre plot points, but that's a pretty big one. So I hope that we get some answers to that in this final episode too.
Yeah. Let's.
But I don't know. What do you think? I guess to sum up your thoughts on the whole Veidt sequence with tomatoes and everything.
I thought the Veidt sequence. I think it just makes sense for what we've seen out of that particular storyline. I loved. We can do we'll do the after credits. Let's just do the after credit scene now. I love that he's been looking at this horseshoe every episode that at least the beginning couple episodes, and he's like, I don't need it now. I don't need it now. I don't need this yet. And all of a sudden they deliver the cake, 8 candles for 8 episodes, and he blows them out, realizes there's a horseshoe in there, gets excited, and starts digging his way out the bottom. Okay, so still don't know how he's going to get off Europa, but whatever. Has a conversation with Dr. Manhattan, or with Adam.
Yes.
And Adam basically says that he was disappointed that their god left, and that's why they're not letting this guy leave, essentially.
I thought it was some good nuance to at least Adam, because all of these other clones are designed to adore their creator and
blind
to
worshippers.
adore Vite in this case. Whereas Adam, he's pretty pissed off, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that was really important, even if nothing else comes from that. I'm not really expecting it to per se, but I just thought that was still a really great nuance to throw in at the end there.
Do you think maybe he's mad? And I don't know if we know fully why, but do we think that maybe Crookshanks, the lady that was depicted as Crookshanks, maybe committed suicide after Dr. Manhattan left?
Oh gosh, that's
And that and left him alone?
Right.
And we don't know how long. You know, to Dr. Manhattan, time means nothing. To Phillips on Europa could be forever.
Yeah.
You know, could have been a long time. Because we have no inclination to how fast they age or whatever. Yeah. It is interesting. It's really interesting because we only have one episode left to figure out how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
At least of this season. Let's go to talk about the butterfly effect regarding Will Reeves, Dr. Manhattan, Angela. So we're going to kind of backtrack here a little bit. Simultaneously, while he is talking to her, while he is on the pool, he is entering an apartment complex or a townhouse, row house in New York City to Hooded Justice. And during this conversation, Angela's trying to link to her grandfather, saying, ask him about Judd Crawford, or how did you know that Judd Crawford had the Klan robe and was a 7th Cavalry member? And it's great because Will Reeves looks at him and says, who's Judd Crawford?
Yeah.
And she then freaks out to say, oh my God, did she just trigger this entire event? What do you think?
I don't like the perceived gap in time here. I believe it's 10 years.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
I don't know why Angela... Okay. I'm trying to remember if Dr. Manhattan explains that it's 10 years ago to Angela. Because if he does, why would Angela ask about it? Maybe she thinks that he's been on Judd's case for at least 10 years. But it just felt very strange that Angela would ask.
Okay.
10-year-old Will... What's the deal with Judd?
No, not 10-year-old, but 10 years younger.
10 years younger. Yeah, sorry. I know it's not literally like Will as a child, but
right.
Yes, the 10-year prior, like why he would have known that. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we know that there's been a lot of symbolism to eggs throughout this entire series. I guess I do have a problem with it because to me it is, but I have a problem with it because I have the same problem with the Dr. Manhattan stuff where it's like, it all matters and none of it matters.
Yeah.
Because simultaneously this is all happening regardless. So if that's the case, how does he all of a sudden get tripped up to cause this butterfly effect? You know what I mean? By connecting them. Mm-hmm. Like he would have known that he triggered this, and he would have known, regardless, doesn't matter. 10 years ago, Dr. Manhattan knows that he's causing this ripple that's going to cause the issues 10 years from now. So as far as he's concerned, doesn't matter. Now, if you want to make the argument, and you know what, it doesn't really matter because he actually leaves simultaneously 10 years apart. So even when he has the blocker in, he can pull the inhibitor out, come out, and all of a sudden he can still be in 10 years ago. Right away, instantly having this conversation again. So, it doesn't matter if it's like, well, during this time period he didn't have the inhibitor. But a lot of this doesn't matter because at the end of the day, we have a lot of stuff to cover for the remaining episode.
We do, yeah.
So what I mean by that is I kind of have a small list here. And that small list of things to go into that we don't have answers to. We don't have any resolution to Hooded Justice and Angela as basically being together. We don't have any Topher resolution. We don't have Lady True and the Millennial Clock. Mm-hmm. We don't have the 7th Cavalry or Joe Keane or Dr. Manhattan and Laurie Blake or Laurie Blake and Angela or Looking Glass or any of these other things. So what is your opinion on how much farther we get in this as far as what are you expecting in the next episode?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a pretty wild ride, no doubt about it. The more we've been talking about it, the more I do think we're going to get this kind of team up at the end where they're going to try to bring all these characters together. Because what I don't think we're going to have is some of the interactions we've been talking about that we want to see happen. I think we're just going to have to be okay with the fact that we're not going to really get that longer conversation with Laurie and Angela specifically about Dr. Manhattan necessarily. We might have some resolution there. I certainly hope we do. But a lot of these kind of little side interactions, they're just not going to have enough time to do it, I don't think. So I am anticipating kind of this team up of the characters that have come together thus far, and they'll have to stop, whether this is Keen at this point, whether they'll have to team up to stop Keen, whether they'll have to team up to stop Lady True and whatever this Millennium Clock is going to end up doing. Those are obviously the two biggest, Lady True being a potential villain. We don't know with certainty what her end game is here, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we don't.
And then Keen, we do know his end game, but we can probably safely say that Dr. Manhattan will have to be involved to stop whatever that end game is if he ends up becoming powerful, right? So I don't know. It's with the precedent that has been set with especially Dr. Manhattan's power and his ability to travel through time and time's irrelevance, they could take this series finale so many different directions.
Right. Which makes me think that there's going to be a second season. I don't know. Do you want there to be a second season? Like, do you think the show... I think that I think it's going to be extremely convoluted, or we're just not going to get answers to certain things, like it's not going to matter. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if we didn't see Red Scare again. I wouldn't be shocked if we got no resolution to that, or to him. Wouldn't be shocked if we got no resolution to... Lady True's daughter being her mother, but it's her daughter, but it's a clone. Does that even matter anymore? Probably not. I mean, there's just a lot of things where it's kind of Lost related. I don't know if you're aware of Lost. For those of you out there, it's like kind of the number sequence that kind of generates throughout a lot of the first beginning couple of seasons, and how important it is. And it is, but it isn't, but it is, but it isn't, and everything's intertwined with it. So I don't know. It's the problem with the Lindelof stuff sometimes. So.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. In terms of a season 2, if they don't provide satisfactory answers by the end of this season, in the interest of having those questions answered, yeah, I would want a season 2. But on the flip side, I do stand behind my former opinion that if it's a season 2, I'd really prefer this to be an anthology-style series rather than a direct continuation of season 1.
It would just be fascinating for them to not it's not a cancellation, clearly, but to not keep this going. I can't imagine HBO's not wanting a second season. Maybe Lindelof doesn't want to do a second season. That's fair. I can't imagine HBO being like, hey, let's not bring this back.
Yeah, I'd find that hard to believe too. And I actually read an article about this just the other night where they had mentioned that it seems like not a lot of people are watching this, which that thought has occurred to me as well. We obviously watch it. We talk about it.
Right.
We have this podcast going on, but I don't think anybody else I know, other than you, of course, is watching this.
Well,
I
do think, though, that it's on HBO.
Yeah.
And I think of all the streaming service, HBO is one of those ones that's considered a luxury. Mm-hmm. It is a little bit more expensive. It's about $15 a month. I think outside of something that's this cult following like Game of Thrones, you're not going to get a lot of people that are watching HBO shows. Not to say that people aren't watching HBO shows. Again, I love HBO. I subscribe to HBO.
Sure.
I'm always going to. But majority of the average people aren't subscribing to HBO.
Yeah, and also sorry to interject here, but their overall point to conclude that thought was that even though it might seem like that, there is actually a huge number of viewers that are tuning into this. It just, does it, and I hate everything getting compared to Game of Thrones, but does it have this cultural impact that Game of Thrones seemed to have had? Maybe not, because not literally everybody's talking about it. But also, not everybody was talking about Game of Thrones after season 1.
No, but everybody was talking about the Tulsa race riots from episode 1.
Yes.
There's a lot of Twitter following for this show. And I think that helps it a lot. It can make or break it, really. I even think that HBO, a couple episodes in, started their own official podcast after it.
Yeah.
So, I want there to be a second season because I don't feel like I'm going to get satisfactory answers out of season 1 for some of these storylines. But yeah, I think we need more. We need more time. I don't want it to be just like Game of Thrones. I don't want them to shove everything in 60 minutes.
I agree. And I do think, if we had already received confirmation that a season 2 was imminent, that it had been confirmed, I wouldn't have this trepidation, I don't think, going into this final episode. I'd be like, I would probably have this whole thing flipped on its head. I'd be like, I want some unanswered questions that we'll find out about later, but it's just none of that has been confirmed yet. And combined with the fact that Lindelof, unless it was just complete misdirection, but where he'd said that you can put a bow on the end of this first season, that's a lot to tie up with that bow.
Yes. A satisfactory bow, at least for me.
A satisfactory bow. Yes, very true.
Anything to finish up with this episode?
No, other than the fact that I am very much looking forward to this conclusion. One way or the other, we're going to figure out how those dominoes are going to fall here. So
perfect. Well, if you guys do like what you hear, you guys can go out and give us a 5-star rating, leave us a review. You can email us any comments, questions, concerns, theories. You can reach us at aliensandcowboys@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can reach us at Alien and Cowboy. We do another weekly podcast called Aliens and Cowboys. That's on a hiatus at least till the 18th of December, if not January. I think it's like January 15th. We would say I don't remember exactly what day. Just for the holiday. Mm-hmm. So we do the podcast on TV show reviews, movie reviews, stuff like that. Tune in for that stuff. We might have other projects coming up here in the beginning of the year. So again, tune in with us. Let us know. Thank your mom. Tell your friends. Tell your mom. Tell Nate's mom. And other than that, we'll be back with you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers.